This episode of Escaping Rock Bottom is sponsored by Sabino Recovery. As an ambassador of Sabino Recovery, I have seen firsthand how they transform lives in a compassionate and loving environment. Sabino Recovery is a residential treatment program that addresses trauma, substance use, mental health, and maladaptive coping mechanisms. They offer one-on-one counseling, Emdr therapy, equine therapy, yoga, and so much more. If you would like to learn more about Sabino Recovery, please visit sabinorecovery.com or contact the number provided in the description of this podcast. Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom, back here on the campus of Sabino Recovery, and I am so excited to have this guest on today. She is the clinical director here at Sabino Recovery. Her name is Shara Turner. Not only has she walked in our shoes, she is now helping people truly heal from trauma and addiction. She is a full believer in science, and I cannot wait to just start picking her brain about everything they have to offer down here at Sabino Recovery. Shara, good to always see you.
Really good to see you too, Brandon. Thank you.
Okay, so before we get to all the modalities that you guys offer here at Sabino Recovery, which is all science-based and truly helping people recover to get efficacy, right? So that people can stay sober long-term. Before we get to all of that, tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up and where were you born and raised?
I was born in Missouri, and my dad was a chemical engineer, so we moved to a little town called Morenci, Arizona when I was 2 years old, and lived there until my mom and him got divorced when I was 5. And my mom and I moved to Tucson, and I basically just stayed in southern Arizona my whole life. You know, we moved around quite a bit, but this has really been my home for most of my life.
When we talk about, you know, drugs and alcohol, what age were you when you started to kind of experiment?
So I was about 11 or 12. You know, I'll never forget the first time that I had a Jack and Coke and put a cigarette in my mouth. I was like, wow, this is fun. Like, I feel like an adult right now, you know? And I mean, alcohol was never an issue for me. Boy, that nicotine stuck around for years. And really, I think, perpetuated my own anxiety. You know, when you're addicted to anything and you feel like something's taking control of your life, be it big or small, it really creates that sense of anxiety and almost like you're trapped in your own body that you can't get out and get away from it. So,
yeah, I just remember because I was at age 15 and I did cocaine. And that numb feeling of just that escapism. I was also dealing with, like, I knew I was gay, but none of my friends knew I was gay. I was an athlete. So just anything to take me out of that, like, just living in high anxiety. Because when you know you're gay as a child, it's like really anxious because you're trying to protect everything around you so that nobody knows who you really are. Yeah. So the moment I did cocaine, I felt part of, and it kind of took away that anxiety. And so I kept chasing it. And chasing it.
Well, part of what you said of that is so poignant because it's all about that connection. You know, human beings crave to feel connected to something. And when we feel disconnected, typically from childhood trauma, we're going to find any means necessary to connect. And especially at that age, right? Where you feel kind of out of sorts of we're going through adolescence and it's a really awkward time. Probably the first time you use cocaine, you're like, God, I feel powerful. I feel connected to something. And that just takes hold. So
I do, and I actually remember that because at age 15, I was into cocaine. At the very end of my using, 6 months before I hit my true rock bottom, I got into meth. Yeah. The moment I did meth, that's when I truly felt invincible. Yeah. Like, truly felt like I was the most powerful person in the world. I couldn't be hurt. I couldn't be harmed. I could accomplish anything. Yeah. I chased that for 6 months before I ended up in a coma, on life support for 7 days, with things all hooked up to my body. And finally, that was my awakening moment, being like, okay, this is not okay. Your double life is shattering right in front of your eyes. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about what got you into treatment and into this profession.
Yeah, so really, when you talk about addiction, right? Addiction can manifest in so many different ways. My addiction really growing up was people. I was extremely codependent. You know, the number one phrase that came out of my mouth consistently, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Even if someone stepped on my toe, I'm sorry, people pleasing, wanting to make everyone happy, and that really was rooted in my own childhood trauma. I grew up in a really tumultuous home. Verbal, sexual, mental abuse was really a part of my reality for many, many years. And so that need to bring balance to the nervous system and the brain, I did that through people, and it really was at my detriment because by the age of 20, I had developed a full-blown anxiety disorder. By the time that I was, I guess, around 32, I went to treatment for the first time, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, I was one of those people that didn't necessarily have a drug or alcohol addiction that you could say, oh, there had to be an intervention, you're going to die tomorrow. But I'm telling you, that addiction, that codependency is just as just as disabling as some of the other addictions that we deal with. And so going through my own treatment process for anxiety, depression, codependency really opened my eyes to this world. Because before that, I didn't even think about being a therapist. So, a few years later, being a mom of actually 5 kids, I went back and I got my master's program in my late 30s, early 40s, and just thought, this is where I belong. This is what I need to do.
What's it like being a therapist with the track record that you have, with drugs or alcohol and codependency? How does that help you as a therapist?
Yeah, because I've walked in their shoes. Even someone that may have a cocaine addiction, I still understand what the mechanisms are at work. I can walk in their shoes and understand that feeling of needing one more hit, right? Or needing some way to balance out your nervous system and being so desperate for that. And I really do think the best therapists are the people that have walked in their shoes at some point in their life.
I've been to a lot of therapists in my life. The ones that connected with me the most, the ones who got through to me are former addicts, former people who have struggled in the same things that I have. When I was let go from the hospital after being in a coma twice in 2 weeks at the same hospital, they're like, okay, you need to go to the mental health unit. And so I did. And I will never forget this moment. This gentleman started asking me questions. I really didn't even know who he was. I knew he wasn't a doctor and he wasn't a therapist. And he just kept asking me, why are you so angry? And I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I so angry? I'm not angry. I'm happy. And he goes, why are you so angry? And I'm like, no, ask any of my friends. They'll tell you I'll be there for them. I'll always be there for them. I'm a great friend. And he looked at me, he goes, no, Brandon, I'm asking you, why are you so angry? And I was like, yo, you're going to make me angry if you ask me this question again. Yeah. And he goes, why are you so angry? And my eyes lit up and he goes, don't answer. He goes, Brandon, anybody who is bug chasing, trying to get HIV, anybody who is putting meth in their body, anybody who is treating your body the way you are, is angry.
Absolutely.
Because if you're happy, you would never treat your body that way. Did you know that man cut through me in about 15 minutes, faster than any therapist has ever been able to cut through me? You want to know why? He's a 15-year sober meth addict.
Right.
He knew. And there's this thing about another addict to another addict is like, yo, manipulator, you cannot manipulate me. I'm a master at it. Yep. So I think that's one of the beautiful things that somebody like you has the ability to offer. And why it's so incredible down here at Sabino is because a majority of the folks who are on the leadership team and those who are actually working one-on-one with the residents, they've walked in your shoes. Yeah. And there's something powerful about that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, really my biggest passion is trauma, right? I think that's what sets Sabino apart is that we don't just focus on the label of addict or, what's your drug of choice? Yes, we ask those questions, but it's not our focus. Our focus is what happened to you? What has you so dysregulated that you feel the need to reach out and engage in all of these maladaptive coping mechanisms that are harming you on a daily basis? What happened to you? Because I don't believe people just wake up and go, yeah, I'm going to go start using drugs today. No.
Just like even with relapse, though, with, somebody who has sometimes, what I tell people, and I'm like, no, they didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I just want to throw my life away today. People in recovery can still suffer a traumatic event within, being sober.
Right.
And that can come back and haunt them, and it can, send, crisscross their wires, and suddenly, they're making those bad choices again. Yeah. I really want to talk to you about some of the techniques that you guys offer here, because it really does set it apart from so many other treatment facilities out there. And for those who are watching and listening right now, it's really important that you understand this, that no treatment center, they're not all treated equally. Yeah. They're not all created equally, and that some are just hands down a hell of a lot better than other ones, right? So let's talk about EMDR light therapy. Yeah. What are some of the positives that can come from EMDR light therapy that is different than talk therapy?
Yeah. So EMDR, and we just really call it EMDR, is short for bilateral stimulation, right? It was initially eye movement desensitization reprocessing. But as it has progressed, I mean, it's been around now for many, many years, they've realized that any type of bilateral stimulation, whether it's holding buzzers, the light bar, tapping on the hands, whatever that is, that stimulates that lower brainstem. Because what happens when we have a traumatic event is it gets lodged in that lower brain. When we're in fear and we're traumatized, our frontal lobe goes offline. And then when it comes back online, those memories are still there. So what EMDR does, while utilizing bilateral stimulation, we get into that memory and we instill new cognitions around that memory. Or like we instill a calm space. We bring in, a safe person, whatever that might be. And it reprocesses that memory that's stuck in that reptilian part of the brain, back up into the rational part of the brain. And they're able to see that traumatic event differently. A lot of my residents, what they'll say is, yeah, I mean, it's not gone, but it feels farther away. I hear it all the time. It's really an amazing modality with a lot of efficacy.
I mean, it's not a lobotomy where you're just going to erase something.
No.
It's not, you tell people, you're like, no, listen, it's not going to delete it out of your memory, but we don't have to react to it the same way.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's about the reaction.
It is always about the reaction. Yeah. How am I going to react to this? Am I going to be in a calm state, or am I going to, go to meth to escape, from that, moment? Or when that moment resurfaces, am I going to choose to numb it with alcohol?
Yeah. Yeah. And that all goes back to that dysregulated nervous system. The other modality that you and I have actually talked about a little bit prior to was somatic experiencing. That to me is a great adjunct to EMDR because you're not necessarily recounting all these traumatic memories. You're just getting in touch with the sensations in your body that create that reaction, right? People are so disconnected, their minds from their bodies, that learning new ways to get back and connected to your body and regulate your own nervous system. But first you have to have the awareness that you're even dysregulated. Most people walk around on autopilot all the time and don't realize, oh, I'm dysregulated. No, let me grab a beer, because that's going to regulate me. They're not even thinking about it, right? It's an automatic response because at that core part of our brain that is totally unconscious, the number one focus of that part of the brain is survival. And when the nervous system's dysregulated, we think we're going to die. I mean, that's the core of our belief. So we will find anything to regulate that nervous system.
How do you, it's somatic, right?
Somatic experiencing.
Somatic experiencing. How do you do that? So, is that through talk therapy?
No.
Or is
it's not talk therapy though necessarily, because talk therapy is really focusing on this frontal lobe up here.
Right.
Of course you are conversing, but and I'm not a somatic experiencing practitioner, but a really good somatic experiencing practitioner focuses on what you're doing, what movements you're making with your body, how you're breathing, how you're nodding. So if someone, let's say, is like tapping their foot over and over again, they would say, so tell me about that. What's going on with that right now? All that's doing is getting you out of this frontal lobe and into your body, because people don't even realize what they're doing. Again, we live 80% of our life on autopilot, right? So it's really bringing awareness back into the present moment and back into the body.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. I want to talk to you also, which we talked about before, equine therapy. Mm-hmm. So people ask me all the time, like, how does sitting on a horse actually help you? Yeah. And there really is a purpose for it. Yeah. What is the purpose? What does a horse do? Or what does the horse see or feel or sense that really kind of breaks through to somebody who does suffer from trauma or who does suffer from addiction?
So I've been an equine therapist now for going on 6 years. And I actually grew up in a small town in Wilcox where I was rounding up cattle at 8 years of age. So back then, if you would have told me I was doing therapy with horses, I'd been like, yeah, whatever. All there for you. Saddle them and you take them on a ride. You round up cattle, right? No, when I came across this modality because of my, experience with horses, I was fascinated. Basically, what happens is, again, I'm going to go back to the brain because there's 3 parts of the brain, main parts. There's the frontal lobe, the limbic system, and then that amygdala, that survival mechanism in the brain. The biggest system in a horse's brain is the limbic system, the emotional control center. They don't have that frontal lobe. So when a horse doesn't respond to you in a certain way, it's not because they don't like the shirt you're wearing. They don't care, right? They're responding to your energy, to what you're bringing into that arena. Do they feel safe? Do they not feel safe? So when a horse responds a certain way, it's an opportunity for that person to check in with themselves. As well, horses are prey animals, right? So their very survival depends on living in the moment. People that have survived trauma usually live in 2 states. Either they're in the future with the what ifs, or they're in the past with all the shame, guilt, and regret. Horses just live in the moment. So being in their presence, I hear it over and over again. Gosh, Shara, after I just spent that hour with that horse, I feel so calm and peaceful because you were mindful. You were living in the moment. You were enjoying it. And so again, it's that combination of their mirroring our energy and that mindfulness piece that makes it really therapeutic.
So I can actually attest to this. So I maybe rode a horse at a birthday party at age 7, and then was down here at Sabino at the end of October, beginning of November, end of October, and I'm out there riding a horse for essentially the first time with you for like 15, 20 minutes. All I know is that when I got off that horse, I was much calmer. It really, like, that was just 15 minutes of an experience. So I definitely felt like even my anxiety just drop a lot. But even riding on the horse immediately felt safe enough to start talking about some really deep stuff to a total fairly stranger at that moment.
Right. Well, so, you kind of go back to what we were talking about with EMDR. When you're riding a horse, what better bilateral stimulation, right?
I mean, that horse is trotting, and you're going back and forth.
And then you're riding a horse with a trained therapist, you're kind of letting out all your secrets. You're in the moment in beautiful surroundings. Like, it's great therapy. And we actually do equine in 2 different ways here. We do groundwork, where we do activities on the ground with all the residents, kind of team building. We do individual work, and then we also do horseback riding. All 3 modalities offer 3 totally different experiences, which is really cool.
Okay, let's talk about neuroplasticity.
Okay.
Because I am so fascinated by it because I believe in it 100%. I believe that we can rewire our brain, that we have the ability here to really change how our brain thinks and how we react to certain things. There was you said one thing that has always stuck with me about neuroplasticity. You said, Brandon, neuroplasticity can either work for you or it can work against you.
Right.
When you said that, I really thought about it in different aspects of like my life or a lot of my sponsees' lives. And I know sex is a really taboo topic, and I wish it weren't. Because sex is a part of every one of our lives. Mm-hmm. It can be extremely healthy. It can also be extremely unhealthy, right? But we can't quit sex like we quit meth or we quit booze because it's healthy, right? One thing that I want to talk to you about when it comes to neuroplasticity is porn addiction.
Okay.
Because porn can really lead somebody into a dark space, right? But if somebody is watching porn on a daily basis, are they not honestly like brainwashing themselves into thinking of something that's not reality, but it's tricking your mind into thinking it's reality, and it can lead you down a really dark path.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of twofold. So I'm going to start out with the neuroplasticity piece. Okay. Neuroplasticity is the idea that we can rewire neurons at any age. So old dog, new tricks thing, not true, right? It's 5 components: repair, which is all about food. Nutrition. People don't realize that nutrition is actually part of neuroplasticity. Can't have a healthy brain without a healthy gut, right? And then the stimulation piece, that's all the different modalities of therapy that are offered. The modulation piece, that's neurofeedback, that's medications. And then mindfulness piece is part of neuroplasticity, that's meditation, yoga, even equine. And then the differentiation piece is where we get in trouble, because we can have all these components working for us, right? Differentiation is taking all the applied lessons and applying it every single day. People come to treatment, they've got 35 days, they're getting massages, they're doing equine, they're doing all these amazing stuff, they're rewiring their brain at a fast rate, then they leave, and what? They go back into a world where the triggers are everywhere. And it's so easy to slip back in, and the minute you slip back in, you just start rewiring your brain in the opposite direction. The work has to continue. And want to speak to the idea about porn addiction, it's the same concept, right? Neurons that wire together, fire together. Something that's done on a habitual basis over and over again and has proven in your own mind to regulate your nervous system has a reward. It's a reward system. When you perpetuate that reward system over and over and over again, it's almost as if you don't even know how to get out of it. It becomes a part of your everyday life, right? But this is exactly what we do with neuroplasticity, whether it's sex, gambling, shopping, codependency, drugs and alcohol. To me, they're all maladaptive coping mechanisms and likely rooted in some type of trauma. And the way out is by approaching it from a holistic, integrated place with the concepts of neuroplasticity in mind. And I think it can mend anything. I really believe that if enough effort is put into it. So
we're not violating anything HIPAA, because I'm giving you full on authority to I'm going to tell you something that happened, in my life to help better explain it. Yeah. And because I when I say that, I know that there are other people out there who have experienced the exact same thing of my experience. Yeah. Being repeatedly molested and raped as a child, right, for periods of years. It was really hard for me. One of the issues that I've always had with just traditional 12-step programs is that they always had this saying, it doesn't matter what brought you here, so as long as you're here and you stay here. That is so averse to going back and healing trauma, because it's almost like keep it compartmentalized, just be here, and let's just not pick up a drink. The hardest thing for me was, no, I need to know why at age 15 I became a sex addict. I grew up in Orange County, California. I went to all boys prep Catholic high school. I was playing international soccer. I got straight A's. From an outsider looking in, and moms and dads who grew up around me were shocked when they read my book, because they're like, we were part of your life. You were given every resource. How did you end up like this? And what happens when you're repeatedly sexualized at a young age? What does that do to the brain development? And how can that send somebody like me sideways at such an early age to cope with drugs and to cope with sex?
Yeah. Of course you did. Of course you coped with sex, because that's what you knew. You were sexualized at such a young age. And I'm imagining it was somebody that was an authority figure.
Yes,
right?
Both of them were.
Right.
A teacher. Both of them were. One was a teacher, one was a coach.
That you're supposed to respect and look up to and keeps you safe. Because that's what we're told about adults as children. We respect them, we look up to them, and they keep us safe no matter what. So then someone comes along that we respect, trust, and think they're keeping us safe, and they hurt us in some way, specifically with sexual developmental trauma. It actually feels good. So the body has this response. And the mind goes, no, 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 this is wrong. And what happens? You become separated, your brain from your body, right? And then you grow up thinking that that's your self-worth. My body, my usefulness, that's my self-worth. And you look for it in every single relationship you come across.
It's so interesting. What you just said was that you enjoy it.
Of course.
And I did.
I know.
Even at 15 and 16. And I think that that's the level of shame that I carried with me. Yeah. Because after I would have that sexual experience, I remember going home, looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, and would physically beat myself up to the point of bruises all over my body, because I was so shameful about what I just did, even though sought it out at that age. I didn't seek it out as a child being molested, but at age 15, 16, 17, 18, I was then seeking it out because I was getting that immediate pleasure. But as soon as that pleasure was gone, it was dark. Yeah. It was so dark.
It's so dark, Brandon. And I had quite a bit of sexual abuse as a child, and I can so relate how many times I walked out of a man's bedroom in my 20s just feeling horrible about myself, and I kept going back because it's how I defined myself. It's how I felt viable, how I felt beautiful, because at 6 years old, that's what I was taught, right? And until you unravel that trauma and get to the bottom of it, you'll keep acting out in the same way. So I get it.
Yeah, it just is. I want to talk to you also because of the pandemic. And, I'm somebody with years of recovery, right? I've got a lot of experience, and I know you do too. Yeah. And I've struggled lately. The pandemic, we're going about 10 months into it. There is some light at the end of the tunnel with some vaccines and some developments, but the reality is this: isolation is hell, and especially for addicts and new addicts. What do we tell people? Don't isolate. No. They turn on the news, and unfortunately, I'm the guy delivering that news, saying, isolate, stay at home. Right. Thinking in the back of my head as I'm saying that, being like, oh my God, there's going to be so much relapse and death with people suffering from addiction. Yeah, right. What does something like a pandemic do to somebody's psyche?
Oh, wow. Lots. Well, first of all, right. I mean, as I talked about, this biological need to connect, that is rooted in our physiology. So missing that human connection is a really big deal. They often say that the opposite of addiction is connection. I've heard this before, and it's true. I think you as a child looking for a way to connect, had that cocaine, it worked for you. Another part of that is that people have lost a little bit of their purpose. I'm a really big believer in you have to make meaning out of your adversity and have a purpose. Part of the reason I think I was able to overcome my childhood trauma is I had a purpose. If I couldn't come to work every day, Brandon, that would take its toll on me. I'm sure of it. So the loss of connection, right? Not having a purpose. And then the fear associated with COVID. We're living right now in a society of fear and scarcity. And that's where our brains are. Instead of building people up, we're tearing people down. It's either your way or my way, right or left, black or white. That's not how the world works, And so that's what I feel this has created, this huge sense of segregation in our society right now. If I had advice, I would just tell people, again, to stop kind of feeding into all the rhetoric. You don't have to be right to be heard, and find a way to connect to something outside of yourself, whether it's a person or a purpose, every single day. Whether that's writing, journaling, running, something that feeds your soul, you got to find what that is and practice it every day.
I love what you just said about finding that purpose in your life. I was with my station manager. She's one of our executives at my station yesterday. Yeah. And we were just kind of shooting the shit, having, just talking back and forth, checking in. How are you? Like real, how are you? Not like that surface level, how are you? Right. And, I was telling her, and she goes, Brandon, I'm so proud of you for what you're doing outside of news, like all the work that you're doing in recovery. And I looked at her and I said, my passion is telling people stories. I love telling people stories. Like I love sitting down with somebody and asking them about their life and all their life experiences and then broadcasting it. Like I love that. That's my passion. But my purpose in life, I did not survive umpteen overdoses and near-death experiences so that I can read a teleprompter and make a lot of money. Mm. My purpose in life is to speak openly about my life experience because I know how lonely and dark my life got as a child, even as an adult, and I will do everything in my power so that nobody else feels that. I know. Like I can get teary-eyed thinking about it because it's so dark. And my passion is news, but my purpose is this. Yeah, my purpose is this. And holding on to that has really saved me, at some times, in this time of isolation. They even asked me, my love language is touch, right? Being able to identify that is crucial, right? You need to identify what your love language is, especially in a time like this, because they asked me, do you want to work from home? And I said, absolutely not. No. I can't. Like, I'll be that guy that comes into the studio. Like, I need it. I need to be around people. Even the sense of like in a newsroom, like we call ourselves the hugging newsroom because like everybody's just huggers. Not even to be able to do that.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. It's really hard, and trying to navigate ways around that.
No, and I love your passion about that, because that is really my purpose, is to help people. And I want to say any trauma, right? But specifically, it's that sexual developmental trauma that brings along such shame in the body, right? I had a reaction. I let this happen. Somehow it was my fault. And just reducing that stigma and letting people realize there is a way out from that. And you have to be able to talk about it. But going all the way back to your point, you can't talk about it with a therapist that A, doesn't get it, and B, doesn't help you feel safe. Because the minute you feel judged by someone, you're going to shut down and that therapy session is over. So
agree with you 100%. And I have a great trauma therapist right now, and I feel so safe with her. And that's the reason why she's able to really get down deep into my brain, get past this part, get back there. It's only because I trust her, you know, because she's actually mirroring what I need to hear and see and feel. Which is really important for me because I really didn't have that mom figure growing up. I missed out on that, you know, that like compassion, the empathy, you know, it was very judgmental and very shame driven. And so, but you know, I focus on sex a lot because it's just, you go into 12-step rooms and people don't even want to talk about it in 12-step rooms because shame is still around it, even in 12-step rooms. And I know where that can go sometimes, you know, and those, if you don't treat it and you don't address it, because there have been moments even in my recovery where I crave that touch so much that I'm willing to give up everything in order to put a drug in my system to go have that kind of connection, you know? And you know, you could have over a decade in recovery and still be so unhealthy in sex, you know? And so I just always love to be able just to talk about it and make it top of mind. And the more you talk about it, the less shame around it, right?
The more you talk about it, the more people you realize have been through it, right?
Every time I share about it, and I will say that every time I'm in a 12-step group and I lead a discussion and I talk about like taboo sex or something, somebody comes up to me after the meeting and they're like, thank you. Like, just thank you for just saying that because like, I don't want to feel like I'm the only one like having those thoughts. Do you really believe that people who have suffered child trauma, adult trauma can heal even after a relapse?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I think it's never too late to do this work. I really believe that with my whole heart. And again, you know, I grew up in the public health system, you know, not grew up, but my early career, I mean to say, spent most of it in the public health system. And it's beautiful work. And I know that it's needed work. And I know there's a lot of people out here that don't have resources. But the answer was to fill them up on meds and send them home to eat a corn dog. It doesn't work. And then you ask yourself, why are they not staying sober? Because they don't have a home to live in. You know, they don't really have normal food, you know, healthy food to eat. They don't have anyone to connect with. Of course they're drinking, right? But people just shame them. When I found Sabino and I realized there was a program out here that actually hit all these components of recovery, I knew I had just walked into my home because this is what I believe in. Someday I hope that what we do at Sabino spreads far out into the world and is far reaching, because everyone needs to come at treatment and mental health as integrative, holistic, and all encompassing. It's not about labels. It's about treating what happened to the individual. And so if you come at it from that approach, I really do believe people get better.
I swear I could sit here and just talk to you for hours. Like truly feel like I could just talk to you for hours because 30, 40 minutes has already gone by. What's that last message of hope? There's been a lot of relapse during this pandemic. And I tell every person who relapses, I don't care. Yeah. But I mean that when I say that I don't care. Come back. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I don't look at you any differently. As a matter of fact, I think you're damn strong, and I actually think you have something better to offer. Right. Hope to those who do. Yeah. What do you say to the people out there who are struggling right now, who may have relapsed and they feel that sense of shame?
There's a lot of you out there. So just know that you're not alone, and that's okay. Reach out for help. There is help available. Whether it's a friend that you just call and say, hey, I can't do this anymore on my own. Can you help me? Or it's a treatment center. Call and say, hey, I need a referral. Or a therapist that you know down the street. I mean, it's that first phone call, that first step. If you know it's a problem now, I guarantee you in 6 months, it's even going to be a bigger problem. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
You rock. You rock. I can't wait till our next conversation. Right. And thank you for listening or watching this episode of Escaping Rock Bottom. This episode of Escaping Rock Bottom is sponsored by Sabino Recovery. As an ambassador of Sabino Recovery, I have seen firsthand how they transform lives in a compassionate and loving environment. Sabino Recovery is a residential treatment program that addresses trauma, substance use, mental health, and maladaptive coping mechanisms. They offer one-on-one counseling, EMDR therapy, equine therapy, yoga, and so much more. If you would like to learn more about Sabino Recovery, please visit sabinorecovery.com or contact the number provided in the description of this podcast.